to the Wing Space podcast, a place to take up space, a space for you to settle in, sit back, relax, and focus a little bit on health, wellness, faith, family, and this crazy thing called life.
This podcast is not a replacement for mental health treatment or professional health care. In case of crisis or emergency, please contact your local healthcare provider or dial 911.
Hey there, and welcome to the Wing Space podcast, a place to take up space. Today we're going to be diving into the topic of Boss's Day, and really it's a topic about the importance of being a good leader. So you're going to be watching this episode or listening to this episode sometime the 20-something-ish of October here in 2024, and across the country, some folks on the 16th would have celebrated Boss's Day, and that, according to Wikipedia, is pitched as a day for employees to thank their bosses for being kind and fair throughout the year. And you know, it's interesting to be a boss and to have been a supervisor now for a number of years. And really, I just want to talk candidly with you today about what I think it means to be a good leader and the lessons that I've learned about leadership over the course of my I would say older teen into adult life. So kudos to all of you who are in the role of supervisor. Some people are in the role and they are paid for that. They are designated as supervisor. Some people take on the role as leader, not because they're in necessarily a job or a position as such, but they are a leader in their characteristic and in their personality. So shout out to all of you that do that. And those, you know, they say natural born leaders. And I truly believe that there are people that have those skills. And I also believe that people can grow and develop their leadership skills. Much of what I have learned about being a leader is based on two experiences. It's the experience of having had really great supervisors, in contrast to the experience of having some really difficult and, dare I say, toxic supervisors. And my supervision style is a mix of both of those. So, you know, I remember my first job out of high school. I worked at a local pharmacy, and, you know, I was just learning what it was like to be a supervisor. And we had, you know, we had the store manager, we had the pharmacy manager, we had kind of people that took assistant manager roles, and it was a good experience. You know, I had a really good experience in that first position, and I don't really know that I took anything substantial away from that role in terms of being a leader or not being a leader. You know, nothing really stands out. But I'll tell you, you know, shortly after I graduated from my undergraduate program, I got a position, and I'm just going to give a shout out. I had a position at Big Brothers Big Sisters of Southern Maryland here in Leonardtown, and I worked as the case manager for Charles County. So my physical office was in a shared space in Charles County, and then we had a case manager who was in a shared space in Calvert County. And then we had a local office here in Leonardtown where we had the executive director, an administrative assistant, and the St. Mary's County case manager kind of all shared realistically what was a closet in a local building here. But that manager, her name was Beth Flynn, and she taught me so much about how to be a good supervisor. And one of the best things that she taught me, which is something that I believe I carry with me today. And I'm not going to spend this episode tooting my own horn. I'm just going to share with you the things that I've learned. Beth shared with me the idea that the work that we do is hard. In this field of human services, social work, psychology, working with people, it's hard work and long hours, sometimes thankless in various ways. But that it was important that we come together as a team, and it was important that we come together to take care of ourselves. So she had this rule that we worked Monday through Thursday at our assigned locations, but every Friday we all worked in Leonardtown. Now, let me remind you that I said that it was basically a closet, so it was tight quarters on Friday. But it was really great to have that team camaraderie, and we always went out to lunch, and it was usually an extended lunch. And her philosophy was, you know, she knows that we would work through lunch and sometimes work through dinner, because of the hours that we kept, but that on Friday it was her time to recognize us. And while I'm not able to do that same thing and haven't been able to do that same thing in various places that I've been a supervisor, I believe that true leaders acknowledge the hard work that their staff, their team do, and they celebrate that regularly. So whether you are a manager of a corporation or a store or a captain of a team, celebrating on a regular basis and honoring the accomplishments of the people on your team is really, really important. And I think that sometimes goes unnoticed. I've heard people talk before about, well, why should people be celebrated or congratulated or thanked for doing their job? On one hand, I understand that concept, right? There's this idea of you meet expectations, which means you did your job, or you exceed expectations. You go above and beyond, meaning you do more than what is expected of you. And I think some of that is gray area. I think some of that is subjective rather than objective. And I think that we have to realize that not everybody comes to the table with the same capabilities, with the same variables in their life. I once saw this image, and I'm not sure who the cartoonist was, so I'm sorry I can't give credit where credit is due, but it basically was a human being sitting at a table that basically said, you will all be tested on your ability to climb the tree. And there was a line of animals, and behind that line of animals there was a tree. And so in that line of animals you had a frog and a snake and a cat. Obviously they can climb a tree, but then you also had a giraffe and an elephant and, a hippopotamus, or animals that clearly cannot climb a tree. And it always reminds me of this idea that we do not all come to the table with the same skill set, yet we are oftentimes judged and assessed by our ability to accomplish the same tasks. And so there are some standards, obviously, that have to be put in place, but we also have to recognize that people have different skills, they have different strengths, they have different weaknesses, they have different places that they can grow, they have different places that they shine. When we look at a team, for instance, right, if we're looking at a sports team, on my screensaver over here on this other computer is a picture from lacrosse. So I'm just going to go with lacrosse because it's what's fresh in my mind in terms of what I can share with you about. Interestingly enough, I was driving this morning to school with my son and one of his buddies, and one plays football. My son used to play football, and I said, football is one of those sports that I cannot remember all of the different positions. I mean, certainly I know the key ones, but all of the various positions, I just do not remember them. And so we had this conversation about what all the positions were, and clearly I did not succeed in that conversation. But, when we're looking at lacrosse, for instance, right, you have, let's just say midfielders. For those of you that don't know lacrosse, the midfielder can play offense and defense. They can literally run 100 yards, the entire length of the field. And over the course of the career that my children have had playing lacrosse, there was a couple of games where I would say to my son, how come every time we lose possession of the ball, you go off the field? I mean, he's fast and kind of quick on his feet, and he's got good stick skills. And he said, I'm an offensive midi, not a defensive midi. So when we would lose possession, then he would go off the field and a defensive midi would come on. And so I started to pay attention to that and recognize different people's strengths and where different people shine. So if the coach put every midi to just be expected to play regardless, then the coach wouldn't be tapping into everyone's strengths and would potentially be focusing on some people's weaknesses. And I think that that's true in the corporate world, in the business world, that, you can have two cashiers, but each one is going to come from a different place. I talked about that first job that I worked at a local pharmacy. One of the cool things that I liked to do was stock the shelves. And those of you that know me know that I like to organize and I like to decorate and things like that. So it probably doesn't surprise you that me stocking shelves was something that I enjoyed to do, because it gave me an opportunity to clean things up, right? To tidy things up. I could take all of the shampoo down and I could wipe the counter off or wipe the shelves off, and then I could put everything back up and neat, tidy, right? I had other friends that did not want any parts of stocking. They would rather work at the register and, check people out. So if there were two of us working, they would do that and I would do this other thing. We were both cashiers, hired for the same job, but we played on each other's strengths. And I think that leaders need to recognize that as well.
Are you a yogi in Southern Maryland looking for a place to practice on Thursday mornings? Look no further than Gentle Yoga with Lori Bruce at Hope and Healing in Leonardtown. A certified yoga therapist, Lori brings over 2 decades of yoga training and teaching to her classes. Gentle Yoga with Lori is suitable for all levels. Join us in person or tune in from home, as all Thursday morning classes will be available virtually. Space is limited, so reserve your spot today at loribruceyoga.com/schedule.
Here in our practice, we have people that have really great clinical skills and they want to come in and they want to do therapy. And then we have other people that like the marketing aspect of it. They like the creative design programming aspect of it. So we give them opportunities to do those things. And the people that don't want any parts of marketing, the people that don't want any parts of social media, we don't make them do it. One thing for leaders to keep in mind, if you are an aspiring leader or you are a new leader, or even if you've been a leader for a really long time, are you tapping into the strengths of the people on your team? And then a second aspect of that is, are your team members seeing you do the work? There's this concept of servant leadership, if you've ever heard of that. And I think the best way to describe servant leadership is that as the leader, you're serving the people that are on your team, but that you're also doing the work. There's lots of different descriptions and kind of pictorial descriptions of what leaders are versus managers, or what leaders are versus bosses. And, when I was at a leadership retreat or a wellness center creators retreat recently, that we talked about this idea, and they asked us to draw a picture. And so what I drew was very poorly, by the way. A manager is the person that's like at the front of the boat and everybody else is paddling, and the manager is, or the boss is saying, that's the way where we need to go. Whereas I feel like a leader is someone who's in the back of the boat and they have a paddle or an oar in their hand. And if you know anything about canoeing, for instance, the person in the back of the boat is the rudder, right? They're the one that's going to be steering the boat. And I think that that's what a leader is. They're in the boat, they're paddling, they've got an oar, and they are helping to steer the boat, rather than just standing at the front saying that's where we need to go and making everybody else do all the work. I want people to see me doing the work, working the hours, and in it with them. Because what also happens is that we lose touch when we decide that we're going to fully jump into a leadership role and we're no longer in the trenches doing the work. And that has to happen. I totally understand that, the manager of the store doesn't necessarily get to work the cash register all the time, right? The managers of a restaurant don't necessarily wait tables or work as hostess. And in the corporate world, the CEO is not doing the things that the other people in the organizational chart are doing. But I believe that the further away we get from the actual work that the company does, the more we lose sight of what it takes to do that work. And we see it within mental health. We see laws being put in place. We see insurance guidelines put in place from people that are potentially far removed from doing actual clinical work. And you lose sight of and you lose perspective of what it takes to do that work the further that you get away from it. So if you're asking your clinicians or your staff or your team or whomever it is to work late or to put in an extra hour or to fill in the blank, it's really important for them to see you doing it too. It's important for them to see that you are not above and beyond and bigger than, better than what you're asking them to do. And I talked a little bit about that really amazing manager, and I've had others along the way, and I'd be remiss if I tried to shout them all out, and I'd miss somebody, so I don't want to do that. But the foundation of what I learned was that very that first job right out of college. But I've had other supervisors in various managerial positions who when I worked in long-term care, who were in it with us. If we needed to work late, if we needed to work with a difficult person, if we needed to have a difficult meeting, if we needed to do a task that wasn't the most fun, they were in it with us. They were doing it with us. They had no problem getting their hands dirty, so to speak. And there's also been opportunities for me to have supervisors and managers and work for companies when, the person is, in the shiny office in the corner, right? And they're not doing the work. They're telling everybody how to do the work without respect for what it's like to do the work. There is a difference between leaders and managers. Leaders respect the people that they're working with. They are in the trenches doing the work with them. They also have a vision and a guide for where they're headed rather than just willy-nilly throwing out orders rather than a game plan, right? So again, if we think about a team, sometimes coaches say, you need to do this, right? They're giving an order, they're giving an instruction to a particular player. But as a team, we're going to work offensively, we're going to work defensively, we're going to move the ball faster, we're going to whatever. Guidance, support, caring, compassionate, and transparency. Being able to be honest, knowing that there are things that not everybody can know. HR is a really big thing that's super secretive. Finances a lot of times make people scared, and so you don't want to share too much about finances. But transparency is important so that there's not this almost like, Oz curtain where somebody's standing behind this curtain and what you think you see isn't really what's happening. And sometimes leaders, I think, stand behind that curtain of falsities and the image that they want people to see rather than being vulnerable to show them who you are. I hope that you can come away from this short podcast episode with some ideas about what it is like to be a leader rather than a manager and to celebrate the people that are on your team. So certainly, again, you're going to get this message just after Bosses Day, and maybe some of you are bosses or leaders and you've been celebrated by your team, and kudos to you. But the reality is I give you those kudos now because it takes a strong, determined person, a special kind of person to be in a leadership role, not the boss, not the manager, but in a leadership role. And I give kudos to you for that because you have the ability to make or break someone. You have the ability to create a warm, inviting, welcoming, caring, balanced work environment, or you have the ability to create toxicity and workplace trauma, to be quite frank. And I hope that those of you that are listening want to be a part of a team that has high morale, low turnover, and high retention, a team that feels like a family, and people that are coming in to invest in a career and to invest in their workplace rather than just clocking in and doing a job and clocking out and leaving without the investment in it. So celebrate yourself and your accomplishments, celebrate your team, get in there and do the work with them if you're not already. Have conversations with them about what's working and what's not working and what can I do better? What can I as your leader do better? And be vulnerable to hear it and then be willing to make changes and adjustments. I know that over the course of 20 some years, I have come across lots of people in supervisory leadership roles. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on what makes and breaks a leader. What are the good and the bad and the ugly? And I'd caution you to, hey, let's celebrate the good ones and let's not give name to the ones that are not so good. Thanks for listening. I hope this helps you to celebrate yourself as a leader and to celebrate your team, and maybe you can celebrate the leaders around you. Thanks for listening and have a great day.